TikTok, it's time to rock. It's my pleasure, ladies and gentlemen, to have with us once again a very, very good friend of the channel, Dr. Allen Garber. And I'll tell you the reason why he's called the doctor, just in case people are thinking, my gosh, Allen, are you really a doctor? But to us and a small circle of friends, he is the doctor. And to all you people who have been sending me messages saying, when are you going to get Allen on? When are you going to get Allen on? When is Allen coming? Well, here he is. Allen, how are you, brother?
I'm great. It's wonderful to see you, Andrew. And shout out to our pal, the rock professor, Simon in Ibiza.
Ibiza.
That's right. And Brad is no doubt somewhere strangling a Les Paul, I'm sure. But shout outs to those guys. And it's great to be here.
Thank you. I will be catching up with the Rock Professor and Brad later this evening. The Rock Professor is going to be going live from his bungalow, and Brad I think Brad was gigging last night, so he's in bed getting some nun-eyes time, I'm sure, because it's 6 o'clock in the morning in Melbourne, so too early for Brad to jump on. But I know from talking to him, Al, that he wished the show, especially with you, well, he'll be watching the replay. But good to see you. You've been a little bit active over the last couple of weeks on social media, buddy.
It was all down to my old pal Doug Steele, who he got excited and was like, hey, let's do this and that. And, he wanted to make a video and then me make a response video and all this kind of stuff. And he was trying to pump things up. And I'm like, just let me do whatever I can do to pump up your channel, buddy. And so, so he started putting out these clips. And then I had made some clips to teach him some pieces and teach him some licks.
Sure.
And then that informed the videos that he was making, or I would make corrections to videos that he had made and sent him, some videos of me playing. So that just kind of morphed into, well, I've got my camera out. I'm going to go ahead and do some demo videos that people have been requesting forever. And, I just did I just turned on my iPhone and blew one quick lesson thing, nothing, thought out or anything, but, it's been a lot of fun to just grab about, 15 minutes here and there and kind of shoot some things when, when my kids are, not yet back from school, or, if I got a few minutes while my wife's taking a shower or something. It is what it is.
What I'll do, ladies and gentlemen, if you're watching the replay, I'll attach these videos, even though we're not talking about Van Halen specifically on this show. Gee, see, we can't escape not talking about it. but I'll put links to the video that Doug did with Allen. It's a fascinating video. It's a discussion on the effects that were used on Van Halen 1, and gosh, if you want to know what's going on, ladies and gentlemen, Alan's not going to tell you this, but we can. The juice, the meat, the gristle, everything is going to be, in that video for you Van Halen nuts. And I'll also attach Alan's lesson. And if you guys aren't aware too, I might even dig that out. I'll attach a link about a year ago, was it 2 years ago, that Allen did for Guitar World. It's the most accurate version of Eruption that's tabbed out.
Right. That's the complete transcription that I did with the help of some really great and wonderful, knowledgeable friends. Primarily my friend Bill Flanagan and Matt Sharfglass helped me with the standard notation and tablature, entering my chicken scratch into a great score. And my friend Mark Bonta who helped me work out the Univox EC80 effects dives, and Troy Grady, who helped me and Bill out with a few key licks. And, it is a wonderful, wonderful experience to be able to get that put out there into the universe and gotten it into Guitar World magazine through the help of some really dear friends. So yeah, and I did do a little video with you guys talking about it back then and kind of going over a few licks in Eruption, which was kind of a prelude to what I ended up doing a couple maybe a week ago. I think I started doing the complete walkthrough of that transcription that people have been requesting for quite a while. And oftentimes you're going to see me with an unplugged electric guitar when I'm demonstrating a lot of things. And if I do a demo video, sometimes I'll do something where I'm trying to demonstrate the tone that I'm getting or an effect. And so in which case I will plug in and do the full experience of what it sounds like coming out of my amp or amps. But when I'm teaching things, primarily I'm teaching how to physically play the guitar. And so it's not going to be the most exciting thing to listen to me plunking around on an unplugged electric guitar, but I want to get people to understand the fingers on the instrument and understand how your hands make the sound. About 99% of it really is in the hands. And that doesn't mean that if you don't have the hands of Jimmy Page or Eddie Van Halen, you can't play it. In fact, it's the opposite. It just takes an understanding of how they use their hands. And so I'm trying to get that out into the world. So, I'm going to just, it's going to be me going, okay, place your finger here. And, so it's a lot of that. And I'll demonstrate the licks that way. So I'm not hiding behind, distortion and echo and, any of the other effects that you would hear. I'm really about the physical playing of the guitar. And, that's what people will be in store for if they click on my Eruption video. But forewarned is forearmed.
And I'll attach that video too that Alan mentioned that he did with us on our channel not long after that transcription came out. And I just want to echo one other thing while we're talking about the subject. It was fascinating when Alan, because the penny dropped for a lot of us when we were watching that, it was actually how Eddie was playing it, where his fingers were going. So if you wanted to know that perspective, and a lot of guitar players do, that was the transcription. That's what Alan's trying to teach you, the mechanics of what Eddie was doing, as opposed to, as Alan was saying, well, you can just go here or go there with your middle finger, as opposed to maybe your pinky or something like that. So this is, again, this is why we love social media, Alan, and everyone in the chat, because you can come through at all these different levels, Alan. And if you don't play Eruption properly, maybe Alan's video will be what is it? A goal for you to attain. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, as the original recording is sort of a goal, and people sometimes mistake what I do for saying that, okay, you must play it this way.
Sure.
That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is you can learn as much or as little as you want about how it was actually played. I'm just kind of giving, with all of the evidence and, this multiple people working on things, that are helping shape the evidence that we find, about how something was actually executed. There's a rubric, there's evidentiary method behind every note that I put in a transcription. And, so that is sort of the goal is the recording, but it doesn't have to be everyone's goal. I'm not saying that you have to get every note perfect and correct, but I do think it's good to understand on a note for note level what you're doing. And then you can go and do whatever you want beyond that or less than that, or if you have your own method and you want to do something, I love it. I want someone to have their own interpretation is wonderful. But when you're teaching when you're transcribing, it's it's a note for note level thing. It's not really, well, this is kind of what it is, I don't know. The way I do it and is that, okay, I know that this note was played in this position using this finger, using this pick stroke, because, and then here's the evidence. there's a video of Eddie doing it in 1978. There's a video of him doing it in 1981. There's a video of him doing it in 83, 85, 88. So I've got video, I've got audio evidence, I've got, there's interview evidence where he's discussing, I learned all of this Eric Clapton stuff, and here's how that lick plays into the,
Sure.
So there's an evidentiary basis. It's not me saying, okay, I know how he did it. I didn't know until I got the evidence behind it. It is kind of a goal, but it's, like I said, it's up to anyone. They can learn as much or as little as they want. They can take what they want from it, but at least there's a sort of a more complete basis to start with, if that makes any sense.
I've got a question that I want to ask you, and I promise, ladies and gentlemen, we'll get to the show proper. But this is interesting what Alan's talking about. So, taking into account your understanding of the mind of Eddie when he's doing some of these landmark instrumentals, these pieces. For example, did Steve Rosen talk to you, or have any other Van Halen biographers reached out to you, or do you think they might be reaching out to guys like yourself to get a fuller appreciation when they're going to be discussing? Because any biography on Eddie Van Halen has to include some kind of detail about some of these great recordings, Alan. So do you see that being a part of something that you might be involved in, or have you been involved in anything like that you can discuss with us?
Yeah, well, there. I do know that our friend Greg Renoff did. I would say reach out. We reached out to each other. We came in each other's orbit. I know he learned a few things about, say, like the Ibanez Destroyer guitar that Eddie played. I have done a lot of research on that. So,
yep.
And he was very kind to thank me in the thank you section, the shout out section of Van Halen Rising. And Stephen, I've talked to Stephen many times now. Stephen is basically, his new book, Tone Chaser, which is a long awaited thing. And God bless him. I'm so happy for it to come out in probably the way that I really wanted it to come out. I'm a big fan of Stephen, but he's basically he's retelling his interviews with Eddie and his experiences with Eddie personally in his book, okay. So he's not so much looking to write the canon of, this or that. It's really his own personal experience and the text of his interviews, less edited or totally unedited in terms of I think Stephen doesn't have to hold back, because obviously Eddie's passed, but it's also
sure.
So that's kind of Stephen's rubric, I think, for his book. Greg is a historian. So Greg wants to get as many little details and facts correct. So he's reached out to lots of good friends, to my friend Bill Flanagan, he's spoken to, and I know he's spoken to Donnie Ward and, other really just super smart people, but yeah. And I'm available if Greg is within earshot of this. Yes, he knows, and I go to him because I have questions for him all the time. And our pals that you had on the show, Brad Talinsky and Chris Gill. Chris Gill is a good friend, and we're in regular communication, always talking about the minutia of the very obscure Eddie guitars and playing.
Wow.
And lots of other artists too. Chris is a wonderful guy. Brad is super busy. I'm not as in touch with him as I'd like to be, but Chris and I stay in touch through email pretty darn regularly. Almost every week or so, every other week, we get on a tear, and we just we have a great time talking. But yeah, if I have any kind of knowledge, I'm happy to share it with those guys because they're wonderful and they're doing the good work of getting this stuff in a kind of a something for posterity, if you will, getting it in a book and getting it out there, and I love it.
Well done, and to be associated with you, Alan, and our channel and what we do here is again, I say humbling. Look, guys, before we start the show, there's two other things I'm going to do. I'm going to do a shout out very soon, but I'm going to ask you, please, if you go to our channels page, you'll see Alan's channel there. If you haven't subscribed to Alan's channel, it's really easy. You just hit the subscribe button. Go and hit the subscribe button. Subscribe to what Alan's going to do. Tell him that the 5150 show sent you, and go through and have a look at some of these videos that Alan has got on his channel. The one especially about the Clapton lick was the one that made me reach out to Alan some years ago, going, wow. And then it's all there. If you didn't think Eddie Van Halen and Clapton had a relationship as far as techniques and licks go, Alan proves it beyond any doubt. So
thank you. That's a good lesson to share with people, because that was something that I knew there was a relationship, just generally speaking, but it was my friend Bill Flanagan who really specifically showed me with comparison tabs and going back and forth in discussions with him, where he showed me where this particular lick fit in with many of Eddie's greatest solos. So I have a video on my channel called Clapton Van Halen Lesson. And in it, I go through several Van Halen solos and show how they are directly linked to a quick guitar solo at the end of the live version of Sitting on Top of the World from Cream's Goodbye album. And that was, again, my friend Bill Flanagan, who specifically pointed that out to me. And I dug deep into everything that he gave me. I learned so much from him. And that's essentially what that video is. That's me trying to explain as best as I can what Bill taught me and how it fits in so many places. So that's a cool little video to start off with, But absolutely. As we are on the ZoSo show, it may not be as well known, but I often say it, as much as I love Van Halen and as much as work as I've done on it, Led Zeppelin and Jimmy Page are probably where I've spent the most effort on research and really delving deep. But at some point or another, I've learned, and I continue to learn. I'll think over and over again, as always with any artist that I study. But I've learned all of the studio albums, and I've learned pretty much every live arrangement that's been done of the Zeppelin stuff throughout studying bootlegs and such. And I'm just fascinated with Jimmy and his gear. And I did do a little work collaboration with Jeff Strawman on his book, Led Zeppelin Gear. We've had a wealth of information that's come out since Jimmy had come out with his Jimmy Page, the anthology book, which specifically details his instruments. And although there are some mistakes that I was able to catch in there, but it's been a treasure trove of information. But today we're going to talk about the earliest and the simplest sort of incarnations of what people primarily know Jimmy for. And as we roll through, and hopefully I'll be able to do some other episodes that maybe cover different albums, but we were going to look at today about the sort of the Little Games era Yardbirds, the late studio sessions, and the first Led Zeppelin album, and the gear that was used on those records. It's as simple as can be, and the show will be short.
Yeah. And look, and ladies and gentlemen, we do look forward to getting Alan back to continue the series with the Rock Professor when he's back from Ibiza on this slot. This is a slot that's going to work well for me and for Alan to go through and do this. We just are humbly thankful that Alan wants to jump on and share all this experience and all this knowledge that he's picked up over the years with us on the ZoSo show. But before we kick off, I'm going to do a quick shout out to everybody in the chat, please. We've got Tim Thomas, a very good friend of the show here. Alan, Gretch Zeppelin is in here. We've got Stephen Fish in here. Good to see you, Stephen. Nelson Rodriguez is a very good friend. Charles Green, thank you, brother. Good to see you. I think I saw, here he is. There he is, the Rock Professor. Simon Williams is in here. Teresa from Brazil. Thank you, Teresa. Teresa has done a lot of work sharing our channel in Brazil. We picked up over 1,000 subscribers over the last couple of months because of the work that Teresa has been doing. Thank you, Teresa. Guitar Man 45 is in the chat. Thank you, brother. I think we saw Symmetry here as well. John Conklin is in here. Good to see you guys. And I think that's about it. We'll do a shout out at the end of the show. Thank you for joining us. If you guys haven't subscribed, if you're watching the replay, please subscribe. Go and follow and subscribe to Alan and send him a hi. Alan, so when you and I were talking about maybe doing a ZoSo show together, we were going to probably do something a little bit later, but you suggested to me, look, Andrew, all good things must start off at point A. Start off. Let's go back to the Yardbirds. So tell us why, in particular, the Yardbirds for you is probably the point that we need to jump off on, please.
Right. So basically the Little Games album, in terms of the gear and the ideas and the live shows that Jimmy was doing, it's fairly well documented that was what became the first Led Zeppelin live shows, and hence the first Led Zeppelin album. And the gear used on Little Games was essentially the identical gear, and it couldn't be more simple. There's primarily the one Fender Telecaster guitar, and we can start with that. I sent some photos to kind of give a little guide, and it's now well known thanks to the Fender reissue of the Dragon Telecaster that we see Jimmy playing right there. I believe that is Christmas 1967, right there or thereabouts. That guitar was once a backup guitar which belonged to the Yardbirds. It didn't really belong to Jeff Beck. It belonged to the Yardbirds, but Beck gave that guitar to Jimmy once he switched over from playing bass in the Yardbirds to playing a guitar for the time that Jimmy and Jeff were in the group together. And there's Jimmy currently holding his actual Dragon guitar with the original neck. That neck, or actually, I think that's actually a replica neck that he's got there. The original neck, it's either, I'm not sure, but that could be the original neck with a replaced headstock logo, or I know for a fact that the original neck resided on the brown B-Bender Telecaster from the Firm days and from the In for the Outdoor album. But so I believe, to the best of my knowledge, that neck has now been put back on the original Dragon Telecaster. I believe the Fender Custom Shop might have put a Fender decal back on there that had rubbed off pretty much by the time of the first Led Zeppelin tour. And so that was sort of the primary thing when he started. And here's a replica that I have. This is not a Fender replica. This was made for me by a gent named Jeff Levinson of his company Fab Gear. And he was one of the very first, if not the first guy making quality Dragon Telecaster replicas. His work was essentially, I'm going to say it right here, it was essentially templates were copied from Jeff by many people, not the least of which including Fender. This is made with Fender parts. And Jeff was able to really replicate the pick guard and the material underneath the pick guard. Fender was not really able to replicate that properly, but Jeff has. And so that is a particular part of my guitar that I'm proud to say is way more accurate than the Fender replicas. Even the expensive ones did not get that right. Even so, what they did was, the original pick guard, the kind of the reflective material underneath the clear pick guard had crinkled a lot, like in a piece of aluminum foil would. And there are certain little pools and divots in that. And you'll see that on the Fender replica, including the replica pickguard that they made to put on Jimmy's original redrawn Dragon Telecaster, they have a straight, flat piece of reflective sheeting underneath it with no, no chain, no crinkles in it at all. But that's how the original looked basically from day one. So, but that's just a cosmetic feature. Again, and then the main feature of the guitar is that it has a top loader bridge, and this can all be found out more on the Fender, Fender website talking about their replicas. But the strings go through the top of the guitar, through the bridge right there, rather than through the bottom of the guitar as traditional on a Telecaster. So you'll see the ferrules in the back is normally where you'd string a Telecaster, but in the late 50s, I think it's 58, 59, there were these top loader bridges that had holes drilled for the strings to go straight through the top of the guitar. That made the string, it didn't have anything to do with the scale length, but it made the guitar, in my opinion, a bit easier to play. I don't know, I guess it's because, when you're locating the end of the string this close to the top of the bridge versus going through the body of the guitar, there's a tension that is very much different. And it just kind of makes the guitar a bit easier to play. A lot of people wondered how Jimmy got the tones that he got and how it sounded like a Les Paul, but to me, it feels a bit more like a Les Paul because of that string, that top loading bridge. So
I'm just going to jump in here, Alan. If anybody's got a Les Paul, if you top wrap your Les Paul as opposed to having it go through the traditional way, I think that sort of gives you the experience or the understanding that Alan is talking about. Because I certainly know with my Les Paul there, that's top wrapped, and I know the difference between being top wrapped as opposed to going through the back. So I think that's the similar thing that you're talking about with the Telecaster.
Yeah. And so people often, wondered how, people compared it. A lot of people thought the first album was recorded with a Les Paul, because Jimmy was so famous for being associated with the Les Paul. It's that. So the major component is this guitar, and then the other component, if you can put the slide up, of the Supro amplifier. So it was a Supro Coronado 1690T amplifier originally. It was ended up being modded before Jimmy Page bought this amplifier. Jimmy was turned on to using Supro amplifiers by the great guitar player Albert Lee, who was also using the same type of amplifier. But when Jimmy got his Supro, it had already been modified to have a 12-inch speaker, couple of other component changes that made the sound really, really unique. It was a mystery amplifier until recently, when Jimmy had the original amplifier. He lent it to the great amp builder, Mitch Colby, who designed Jimmy's signature Sun Dragon amplifier, which is a faithful recreation of the original amp. And so that amp is really a special, unique amp, and there's never been a stock Supro amplifier that comes anywhere near the sound of that.
Wow.
And so it was a thing for decades upon decades, and everyone kept saying, oh, this is the sound, or, and then the Supro name would get bought by another company and they'd release things and people would say, oh, this is the sound. It was not. The sound never made it to anyone's recreation. And it never resided in a stock Supro amplifier. It was only that particular modded Supro that Jimmy had that had this unique tonal quality, and that it is now available in the Sun Dragon amplifier, and it is special. You combine that with this guitar, and it gets an incredible sound, just the guitar into the amp. And it's got this very pronounced mid and upper mid-range sound that just punches you in the guts without any other effects. And you're going to hear that sound on rhythm tracks of songs like Smile on Me from Little Games. You'll hear it. You hear this amp was used all through Little Games and for many of the sessions. And it was the only amplifier used for the entire Led Zeppelin album, first Led Zeppelin album. So when you're hearing Communication Breakdown, that's the sound of the Dragon Telecaster going into the Supro amplifier, and that's it. And it's magic.
I've just got a quick little question and back up there for what Alan's saying. So, like a lot of us, we probably realised later on when we read some material, oh my gosh, that he wasn't playing, as Alan said, he wasn't playing a Marshall and he wasn't playing a Les Paul on that first album that we probably thought we did when we were 12, 13 or 14 years old. I was one of those guys. But what was really interesting, though, Alan, over the last, during the late 80s, especially when you were reading some of the material, it was interesting how many people were saying, oh, it was just the stock run-of-the-mill amp that Jimmy was using. There was nothing special about it. It was just, these English guys, and they were just taking advantage of what was available. But Allen clearly has told you, ladies and gentlemen, that there was nothing stock about that amp, and Jimmy knew it, didn't he?
I don't know if Jimmy knew it or not. In fact, I suspect he didn't. I think he thought it was stock because he didn't have the mods done himself. The mods were done before Jimmy got the amplifier. And so it took all these decades later, the really brilliant and supremely knowledgeable Mitch Colby to figure out what was going on with the original amplifier. And he was well aware of stock Supro models and their circuitry, and he compared those to Jimmy's amplifier. I mean, he went beyond due diligence and just, so Jimmy, I know that he said in interviews that he tried to buy more Supro amplifiers, and they became difficult to find because he'd mentioned using it in an interview. And I think that he probably had bought some other ones, and none of them sounded like the one that the one. So that's what led to the whole Sun Dragon amplifier creation, because this is an amplifier that when you're listening to, and there's another slide you can show, according to Jimmy's anthology, Jimmy used the Dragon Telecaster and that modified Supro 1690T Coronado amplifier for the Joe Cocker album With a Little Help from My Friends, on which Jimmy played on several tracks. And he used the Telecaster and that amplifier. So when you're listening to the all-time classic version of With a Little Help from My Friends from Joe Cocker, that is Jimmy Page on the guitar playing, according to Jimmy, the Telecaster and going into the Supro amplifier. And it is super heavy, and it's not, it's just a particular frequency that amp hits with the guitar, and it's just a magical thing. And you hear this basic sound again all over Little Games. And Jimmy's actually, I know Mitch Colby had asked Jimmy, and Mitch told me several of the individual tracks, because I wanted to know, did Jimmy tell you exactly which tracks he used the Supro amplifier on? We know he used it for everything on the first Led Zeppelin album, but he actually was able to get Jimmy to give him a pretty lengthy list of everything that he used it on. So he, and this is before the anthology came out. So we know that he used it for almost the entirety of Little Games and several of the sessions around that time. So this is well before the High Watts and the Marshalls, and it wasn't even, when he was, yes, there's the anthology. It's a wonderful book.
So before this, so remember that, ladies and gentlemen, it's before this came out. So I just wanted to make that point clear for people. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's when I spoke to Mitch before that happened, before that came out. And, so he had detailed the songs, I think it's Bye Bye Blackbird and Margarine. There's several tracks. And if you could put that, you can show the back cover of the With a Little Help from My Friends album, where you will see Jimmy, if you have that handy. There's Little Games. That's the back cover of Little Games. Jim McCarty, Keith Relf, Jimmy, Chris Drea. And that's the back cover of With a Little Help from My Friends, as you see our Jimmy Page right there, right next to Steve Winwood, Chris Stainton, B.J. Wilson from Procol Harum, lots of other great players. Henry McCullough from Wings, later of the Grease Band and later Wings. So the songs that you're going to, and actually this is a great record because the studio personnel are actually credited correctly on each one of these tracks.
Wow.
And so Jimmy is specified on which songs that he played on. There's one track where Albert Lee plays the rhythm guitar and Jimmy is playing the lead. I can't remember which one that was, but that's a good example of due diligence on the part of the people making that record, which would have been, Leon Russell and Denny Cordell, the producers on that, I reckon. But yeah, that just so those tracks are that Telecaster, that Supro amplifier, the Little Games album. And you listen to Little Games, you're going to listen to the tracks that Tinker Tailor Soldier Sailor and all those tracks. You're going to hear this Telecaster Supro combo. And then the only other two effects that Jimmy used on Little Games and then later on the first Led Zeppelin album would have been the early prototype Vox wah-wah pedal. And it's a gray hammerite thing. This was originally it started out, the housing came from Vox volume pedals that would have been used with Vox Continental organs.
Okay.
Like you would have heard from the Beatles and the Sir Douglas Quintet and that kind of thing. And so this is the very first commercially available wah-wah pedal looked like this.
Wow. And
this is my original circa 1966.
Wow.
And this has a unique tone. So this has a particular circuit that did not exist in later wah-wahs. It was just particular to this iteration. And so when you listen to Smile on Me and many of the other tracks that have wah-wah on Little Games, and then you listen to Communication Breakdown is basically the lead guitar in Communication Breakdown is this wah-wah pedal engaged in the full treble position. Also, it was used as the wah-wah in that same kind of way as used on Communication Breakdown. This was used on Whole Lotta Love on the Les Paul with the treble position pretty much totally engaged. So this is a big thing. You will see Jimmy using this wah-wah in the footage from Super Show from 1969, the kind of the best color footage of Zeppelin from that very early period where he's using the Dragon Telecaster. So that's the wah-wah. And then the only other effect would have been your Vox tone bender. This is a Mark 1.5 tone bender. Not quite the same, but the sound is as good as I could get close to the one that Jimmy used. But this would have been available to buy at McCary's on Denmark Street in London at the time. 1966, I believe, was when Jimmy bought his. So you're going to hear this on Little Games a little bit, but it's all over the first Led Zeppelin album. This is the Fuzz that you're hearing on Dazed and Confused. And how many more times? This is the workhorse Fuzz, and Jimmy used this live with the Yardbirds. The live Yardbirds featuring Jimmy Page album is a great example of these things. Couldn't be more simple. It's the Dragon Telecaster. It's the Tone Bender Professional Mark II Tone Bender, and then the gray Vox wah-wah. That's the effects. That's it. No echo, nothing else. That's it. And so that guy created the magic of Little Games, and with a little help from my friends, some great sessions, and the BBC sessions later on used some of that same gear, and then again the first Led Zeppelin album. And there's nothing else to it. It seems crazy, and but that was it. And then there is one acoustic track on Little Games, and that is White Summer. So clearly White Summer was a piece that Jimmy basically stole from Davy Graham, and it's kind of well known. But he is playing a beautiful Gibson J200 acoustic guitar right there. That is the guitar. The only known photos of Jimmy playing that guitar. It did not belong to Jimmy. It belonged to the Yardbirds producer Mickey Most, and that guitar Jeff Beck also borrowed to record Greensleeves on the Truth album with that guitar. What's special about that particular one is it's an iteration of the J200 that had a Tunomatic bridge like you'd find on a Les Paul, although it had white nylon saddles on it. Unlike a regular J200, it had this Tunomatic Les Paul style bridge on it. And a lot of purists didn't really like that, but the great recordings that were made with that particular style of J200 are, undeniable. So that is George Harrison used that type of J200 for Here Comes the Sun, and lots of his great acoustic work. While My Guitar Gently Weeps, the acoustic guitar on that is that guitar. John Lennon even played it on a couple of tracks. Tommy by The Who, it's Pete Townsend playing a J200 with that Tune-O-Matic bridge. But that right there kind of tells you something. It sounds great. So when you're listening to White Summer on Little Games, it's Jimmy playing that guitar with some beautiful compression. A vintage, wasn't vintage at the time, but it was a great studio compressor, and you're hearing the beauty of that guitar right there. It's a special guitar. Mickey Most let Jimmy borrow it to record the acoustic tracks on the first Led Zeppelin album as well. So Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You, Your Time Is Gonna Come, Black Mountainside. Those were recorded with that same guitar. By the time you get to Led Zeppelin 2, Mickey Most, for whatever reason, did not want to let Jimmy borrow that guitar to record, I think because Jimmy was on the road in America, primarily when he was recording that album. Okay. Many of the sessions were done at Olympic Studios for the second Led Zeppelin album. Many of the tracks were done at Olympic in the UK, but a lot of it was done on the road in America. And I'm guessing maybe Mickey just didn't want to take the risk of Jimmy gallivanting across the world with that guitar. So Jimmy used a different guitar for the second album, and maybe another discussion when we get to the second album, we can talk about that guitar that he used on the second album. But and then again, the after that in early 1970 is where that picture was taken. That was Jimmy performing on the Julie Felix show, the only known footage of Jimmy playing that guitar. He's playing a medley of White Summer, Black Mountainside on there. Actually, it might just be White Summer without any Black Mountainside, but haven't seen it in a while. But yeah, that's him backstage at the Julie Felix show. And that was in 1970. It was the last time that guitar was seen, I believe, in public. It's missing. Somebody has it. It was, I believe, my understanding is that it was stolen from Mickey Most at some point, and no one knows where it is. Who knows if the person that stole it or wherever it ended up. I don't know if anyone knows the significance of how great that instrument was. Jimmy loved the tone of that, and he was never able to find another J200 like it until Jimmy's good friend Perry, and I'm rambling here, but Jimmy's good friend Perry Margola found a vintage J200 that had that Tune-O-Matic style bridge and gave it to Jimmy as a present. And so Jimmy's been photographed a lot with that one around the time of the Super Deluxe editions came out. So you'll see Jimmy now has one, but he didn't have it for the longest. And so that was kind of another magical instrument. But, again, those three things, as far as the electric stuff, it's just those three things. And then the other key piece of gear is the EMT plate echo. And if you could kind of show that picture, there's a good little picture of an advertisement that shows that. There it is, the EMT 140 reverb. They call it a reverb unit. It can do echo and reverb. And so everything you're hearing on the first Zeppelin album that sounds like echo or reverb, other than that's over and above the natural room sound that they were able to record, was coming from that. So there wasn't a live chamber as there would have been on the first Van Halen album. It was just the EMT 140 reverb unit. So that you're listening to like the bow solos, the bowing on Dazed and Confused and How Many More Times, and things that are really drenched in echo. It's all that, so, and that's what you're looking there is a picture of something that is, oh man, it's hard to describe if you haven't seen one in person or seen it in relative size to other things to compare. But that thing is huge, and it takes several men to move it. And it's almost, I'm going to say it's got to be a good, maybe 8 or 9 feet wide. Wow. And I think it's about maybe 1.5 feet deep. And it's it's a very delicate system, and it had to have been installed just so for the studios and delivered, and as a unique piece of gear. It wasn't there's one of those in Sunset Sound right now. They actually have some old vintage units there. But that's what you're hearing. And then on the first album, you're hearing Jimmy's mastery of using the mic technique that he's always talked about. He used a close mic, but Jimmy always talked about using a distance mic. So he would have a room mic capturing the organic sound of the amplifiers the sound of the amplifier out in the room. So the room that he's in is giving some depth to the sound. And he always said that he had learned from old engineers that he'd been around during the sessions that distance equals depth. Some people took that to mean that he only used the distance mic, but he didn't. He used, it was a close mic and a distance mic, and those were summed up. So you got that. You've got, there would have been compression from the board, to a degree on certain tracks, but it couldn't be more simple. Again, it's just magic with this kind of archaic gear, but it wasn't anything crazy. I mean, we're not talking about like a Beatles album or a Pink Floyd album where, there could have been any number of things. This is, just kind of raw and, but yet it's refined when you listen to the layering that's on the first album. And, it's just magical. It's historic. I just love it. I love that era of the Yardbirds with Jimmy and those sessions, and the Screamin' Lord Sutch sessions, the early BBC sessions with Jimmy playing the Telecaster, and then the first album. And look at we've got some pictures of them also right at the time, the very earliest photo sessions of the band. And you can see it's bleeding over from, that's the very first session of the band, photo session of Led Zeppelin. I'm not sure if they did that before they left for Scandinavia or if they did it right when they came back, but very, very early days right there. Again, that's part of the same, or a photo session that's near that exact time. Jimmy's wearing the same leather jacket he wore in the Yardbirds. That jacket that he's wearing right there is actually the one he wears on the back cover of Little Games. Of all things. But these were just incredibly young kids. I want to say Jimmy might have been like 23 or something at that time, and I think Robert and Bonzo were like 19. So there's that same jacket. Yeah, Jimmy was not adverse to reusing something over and over again. So that's the magic. And let's say it's going to be a short show because we're talking about the gear from the Little Games in the first album, but that is it, and the rest of it is just the magic and the chemistry of the band and Jimmy's knowledge of sounds and recording. The great Glenn Johns was the engineer on the first album, recorded at Olympic Studios. It's a magical time. So I would recommend to people to seek out on YouTube. You can get it on YouTube now, but when I was a kid, it was difficult to find this stuff. I mean, but you want to look for With a Little Help from My Friends album. Take note of the tracks that Jimmy plays on, and you'll be able to pick him out pretty easily because he does kind of stick out, and it's obvious what's him versus what's Albert Lee or what's Henry McCullough. So. Cool. That's a great record. Get Little Games. Listen to that intently. Listen to all of the Yardbirds B-sides from that time. Happenings 10 years time ago. You want to then you're going right to the Live Yardbirds featuring Jimmy Page album. That's a fantastic record, and it's representative of that sound of the wah-wah, that gray Vox wah-wah, prototype wah-wah, the Tone Bender Professional Mark II Sola Sound Tone Bender, and then the Telecaster, and then you're right into the first Led Zeppelin album, and you're into the first couple of months of touring. Probably about 6 months, Jimmy was using the Telecaster, and then by roughly April of 1969, Jimmy switched over to the Les Paul. And that was roughly at the time that he was switching over to some different gear. Jimmy did not take the Supro amplifier with him on tour. However, he was using the Rickenbacker transonic amps and stuff like that, and the Dallas Arbiter Power 100 head. You see that head on the Danish TV footage, the black and white Danish TV footage of the band. And then you will also see later, you'll see the Vox UL 4120 head coming in with the transonic speaker cabinets, and that ended up being the gear that was used to record the first couple of tracks on Led Zeppelin 2, which was A Whole Lot of Love and I believe Heartbreaker and What Is and What Should Never Be. But that's a whole other conversation, you know. But
sure,
yeah. So we're back, you know. You can one other thing. Let me get you to pull up as we're leading into the second album. We'll talk about that another time. If you can pull up the picture, we do have a picture of Jimmy with in the studio for the second album right there, and I've circled that is the Vox. I mean, that is the Supro 1690T, the modified super amplifier that Jimmy used on the first album. You can also see down in the corner, I've circled that in orange, and if you guys can see it, you'll also see that gray Vox wah-wah right there. This is a picture of Jimmy recording Whole Lot of Love. So wow. he is, that's the gear. And again, you know, for the solo, he just engaged that gray Vox wah-wah. The Vox Long Tom Echo is up on top of the cabinet on the left-hand side of the picture above the, on top of the transonic cabinet. But I believe, and to the best of my knowledge and research, he did not use the Supro amplifier on the second album other than to amplify the theremin. So when you listen to the theremin during the bridge of Whole Lot of Love, it's that Supro amplifier is what you're hearing, along with the Vox Long Tom Echo. So that's the only other time that I know of that it was used. Jimmy, another thing about the Supro amplifier, Jimmy had long claimed that he used that super amplifier with the Telecaster to record the solo on Stairway to Heaven. I believe he recorded the solo using the Telecaster, but according to Mitch Colby, Jimmy said that he absolutely did not use the Supro amplifier to record the solo on Stairway to Heaven. Yeah. So that was something that Jimmy had claimed in every interview going back 40 years. But that was an interesting thing to find out from Mitch. You know, and Mitch is on it. He's telling me this straight from the horse's mouth, from Jimmy to Mitch, and Mitch is telling me this, and everything I've seen, you know, makes total sense there. But I was still shocked at that. I thought it was the Supro amplifier on the Stairway to Heaven solo, but apparently it was not. Mm-hmm. Could have been a Marshall. I'm not sure what amp he ended up using on that. So that kind of changed a lot of assumptions that I'd made, but you know, that's kind of the last that was heard of that amp. I don't know that he ever used it again to record. I do know that he used the Solo Sound Professional Mark II tone bender, ended up getting used. It was only for the first album. It was not used on the second album, to the best of my knowledge. But it was again used on Walking into Clarksdale, on one of the tracks in Walking to Clarksdale, and Jimmy did a couple of takes, and then the fuzz died at the end of the take, and it was never resuscitated again. Apparently, I don't know why he didn't get it fixed. But so that's apparently no more. I don't know whether it's been repaired. You'll see some footage of Jimmy in the It Might Get Loud movie.
Yes.
Documentary. You'll see him showing a tone bender. The tone bender that Jimmy is showing in there is a 90s reissue Solo Sound tone bender made by Dunlop Color Sound under the Color Sound name. Excuse me. I had one of those. I bought one of those back in the 90s, and it's a completely different circuit. It doesn't sound anything like the one used on the first album. And there was a little series of those in around 1966 that had a particular sound that it didn't matter who was playing it. It sounded exactly the same. That was also the same tone bender that was used by the guitar player Alan Parker, who actually recorded the lead guitar on Donovan's Hurdy Gurdy Man album. Yes. On the title track. Many people thought it was Jimmy Page playing on that, but it wasn't. Jimmy never claimed it was him on that. Turns out it was actually a great session guitar player named Allen Parker. I spoke to Allen Parker personally, and he ran down the gear that he used on that. And I spoke to John Paul Jones about that session in person myself and asked him about that session as well. And they both remembered it clear as day. Allen Parker used a SG. It was a 1960 Les Paul, a black 1960 Les Paul, still called a Les Paul, but it was the SG shape, into a blackface deluxe reverb and the tone bender. And that's what you're hearing on Hurdy Gurdy Man. But that tells you how much effect that tone bender has on the sound, because a completely different guitar player, who admittedly on that track kind of sounds like Jimmy Page. They were up at about the same time, and they were probably listening to a lot of the same records. One wasn't copying the other, but the overall sound is so unique to that particular tone bender that different players playing it end up sounding exactly the same. When the tone bender's engaged, it's just bam, it's there, and so that's a really unique thing too. But that's it. That's the long and the short of it, of the gear for Little Games, first Led Zeppelin album, and the early sessions.
There's a couple of things I want to say. So Greg Roberts, Tune, good to see you, brother. Thank you for jumping on. He's becoming a regular run in our chats. So that this is why Alan can speak with confidence. Greg, you made a comment, is this opinion or fact? So Alan has spent 30 years of his life deep diving into this stuff. So back in the day when you had email forums going, Alan was involved in a lot of those Led Zeppelin email forums, and you remember those internet groups that you used to go on, but that was before the advent of Facebook. So Alan's touched base with a lot of people to back up what he's saying. So we're very fortunate, ladies and gentlemen, to have this condensed, articulate history of this Yardbirds with us for a little bit of just under an hour. Thank you, Alan. I just want to add one other little comment. We've got to remember that the wah-wah and the tone bender that Alan has gone into some detail discussing were state-of-the-art equipment back then. So that, it's not like today, 2020. Oh yeah, everyone's got a wah. But the point is that they were certainly state-of-the-art in 66, 67, 68, weren't they, Alan?
Exactly. So that would have been, all of this gear was basically brought together in Jimmy's hands in 1966. And then he just kept using the same stuff until April of 1969. And that's a long time, right? I mean, so, and again, just for anybody watching, it's like, just to be clear. So where I can get the original sources, I try to do the best I can do to make that happen. And like sure. I was lucky enough to meet John Paul Jones in 2000 in New Orleans after a show, his solo show on the Zuma tour. Wow. Couldn't have been more wonderful. And I was able to ask him about the Hurdy Gurdy Man sessions, and he confirmed what I later spoke with the guitar player Allen Parker about. So Jones confirmed, and he's confirmed this online. So actually, you might even be able to just Google John Paul Jones, Hurdy Gurdy Man sessions, Allen Parker. And Jones actually did a kind of an open letter that he sent. I don't know if it was to a music publication, but he listed all of the players on the session. And he was trying to clear it up because so many people kept saying, oh, even Donovan himself thought John Bonham was the drummer on the session, and he was not. Mm-hmm. It was Clem Catini, who was a great session UK drummer at the time, who played drums on that track. And Jones confirmed that, as did Allen Parker. Allen Parker was the guy that played electric sitar on that, and the acoustic guitar and the electric guitar. Donovan didn't even play any of the guitar on Hurdy Gurdy Man.
Really?
Yeah. So, and Jones confirmed this to me. And then again, some of the other things that I'd mentioned, a lot of this stuff about the tracks that Jimmy used the Supro amplifier on, again, that was coming from Jimmy Page, who told this to Mitch Colby, because Mitch, wrote, he cataloged, he wanted to know, probably so he could do tone comparisons when he's making the Sun Dragon amplifier, he wanted to know which tracks he used this amp on and which albums, and did he use it anywhere else. And, so Jimmy actually detailed, to the best of his memory, many of the things. The only thing that Jimmy was fuzzy on was he didn't remember all the exact sessions as far as for other artists that he used it on. But he knew for a fact he used it all over Little Games, and it was the only amplifier used on the entire first Led Zeppelin album. So again, that's not me just pulling this out of thin air. That's me trying to get it from as close to the original sources as I can. And then, I'm using kind of photographic evidence. I'm using interview evidence, just kind of, going back through and, making sure that I'm, that everything's chronologically making sense, and excuse me. Like, for instance, I know Jimmy Page got the tone bender in 1966 because there's actually there's a bill that's at McCary's that they still have in their possession, where they shipped out two Sola Sound tone benders to Jimmy on such and such a date in 1966. The receipt is there, so there's that kind of evidence that I've kind of, gone through and found out. And then, of course, pardon me, sorry, I'm coughing.
That's okay.
And then there's the evidence of me actually getting this gear, playing through it, learning the pieces. When I was a kid in high school, I learned a lot of the Live Yardbirds featuring Jimmy Page record.
Wow.
And I was trying to, I learned a lot of that. I was about like 15 or 16. And, so I got familiar with how the devices sounded, and I would have, I had a few things, I was kind of broke back then, but I would go to pawn shops and I'd be able to find a lot of incredible vintage gear because nobody cared about vintage gear. There wasn't such a thing as vintage in the mid 80s. Not really.
No.
And especially when it came to pedals and effects, it was like, I could go in, like I said in the Van Halen thing, I bought a Script Logo Phase 90 for $20. So, but anyway, so that's just kind of a little background about where that's coming from. And again, I'm reading through the the Jimmy Page anthology book, and just every kind of interview that I could get my hands on, and the photographic and video evidence that's out there. That's what's informing what I'm telling you. So yeah, it's just not coming out of my head or an opinion or anything.
Yeah, and look, and we appreciate this, Alan, and ladies and gentlemen, we're blessed and fortunate that Alan has decided to jump on and share, this 30-year journey of him being a Led Zeppelin Jimmy Page nut with us. So that, and this is our little contribution to the rock and roll music that we hold very dear to ourselves as individuals and as a group, because organic fans and their interpretation on things is always going to be a reference point in the future. So thank you, Alan, for talking about that. I just want to do one little point before we close the show. I do remember talking to Alan one other show. We were talking about the significance of the Beano album, and Alan said, well, look, we've got to go back to what Page and Clapton were doing when they recorded a couple of songs before the Beano album, and the mic placements that Page was using. So this whole experimentation, of what Page was doing as a producer and as a engineer, can be plotted back, and Alan did that really, really well, and we'll probably no doubt talk about that more in the future. Those songs, those numbers, those tracks that they did together are hugely influential for both those musicians, and where a lot of the stuff went in the 60s, late 60s and 70s. Thank you, Alan, for pointing that out. So I look forward to doing more about that with you.
Absolutely. It's going to be fun. I look forward to doing that. And yeah, so, I mean, excuse me. So yeah, we talk about Jimmy Page, we got to remember that he's not just the guitar player. He's the songwriter, he's the producer, and he's well aware of what the engineers are doing. He's working with the engineers that he wants to work with. Yeah. So
thank you, Jimmy Carr. It is great stuff, Alan. Great stuff. We're we're going to cruise, guys. We're going to do a quick shout out. We had Brad Cook, one of the co-hosts of the 5150 channel, in the chat earlier. We also had the Rock Professor. Brad and I and the Rock Professor are going to be back later on. In a couple of hours' time, I'm interviewing Vim Voss. And another special guest is going to jump on. So we're going to be talking about some Van Halen stuff for all you Van Halen nuts out there. Please subscribe to our channel. Follow us on Instagram. You can find me somewhere on Instagram. Follow Alan, and we'll keep you up to date when we do part 2. But we're looking forward to this little segment that we're doing on the ZoSo show. I'm going to get Alan to say the last words. I'm going to ask him to show us that wonderful Dragon Telecaster. That's going to be the thumbnail for the show. So hold on, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Alan.
There it is.
That's a beautiful guitar, brother.
Shout out to Jeff Levinson of Fab Gear, who built this for me. Wonderful guitar.
Thank you for showing that to us and everybody in the chat, Al.
Cheers, everybody.
All right. God bless everyone. Keep safe, and we'll see you guys in a couple of hours.